everybody, and a warm welcome to my channel. In my videos, we'll be dealing with some unpopular and even some slightly obscure opinions about movies that I cherish and hold dearly to my heart. Like most of you watching this video, I love films. But more than that, I love the films that had a defined effect in my life. See, good movies not only entertain us, but they can influence and mold us into the people we become. Being that I was born in the 80s, my most influential films are that from the last quarter of the 20th century. That being said, I'm actually going to try and stay away from the movies I love that are also acclaimed and beloved by the world over. As to be honest, I don't really have much else to say that you probably haven't heard already. I instead want to focus on the less popular movies that are widely not liked or just underappreciated that I still consider a good movie, or at least find enjoyable. That being said, you may actually still share my opinion, which is great, as a confirmation bias is always comforting. But I actually desire to reach the people who don't necessarily share my opinion and to maybe sway them a little to see these movies in a different perspective. I only hope to provide better understanding on why others still find entertainment with these highly underrated films. I probably won't change many minds, but hopefully I might help you to see the films I talk about in a slightly different light. Now, that all being said, I actually want to start my very first episode not with a review, but rather on a journey. A journey that's taken over 30 years. What I'm referring to is the upcoming Ghostbusters Afterlife movie, and just how much of a roller coaster it's been to finally get here. With the upcoming release of the third Ghostbuster film, and yes, I'm purposely leaving out the 2016 Ghostbusters Answer the Call movie because it tried to ignore the original movies, so only fair I return the favor. I thought it would be fitting to start the first episode with my journey for a Ghostbusters 3. Now, like most stories, we will need to start from the beginning. And the beginning was about my very first cinema experience. I was only 5 years old at the time, and being that my parents knew just how much of a fan of the first Ghostbusters film and animated the real Ghostbusters I was, they treated me with my very first cinema experience to watch the 1989 sequel, Ghostbusters 2. Now, I'm not going to go into what Ghostbusters 2 meant to me at that time, as I do wish to leave that for another episode, but I'd rather fast forward a few years to the early 90s and mention the first time I remember thinking about a possibility of a third film. As sometime in my early childhood, I started to realize that all my other beloved franchises like Star Wars, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, Karate Kid, and Alien were all trilogies. See, there was a time where trilogies were a very common thing. I know it's hard to imagine now with the way movie studios love to churn out sequels, but almost all my beloved franchises at that time had a third film in their library, except Ghostbusters. This was the first time I ever realized a third Ghostbusters was inevitable and should be just around the corner, right? Well, not quite. As the internet was in its infant stage of dial-up, I became a member of a few Ghostbuster fan sites, and at that time, it was brought to my attention of a possible working third film. I discovered a script written by none other than Dan Aykroyd himself about the Ghostbusters going to a hell dimension of New York that was later named Ghostbusters 3 Hellbent. It was a very high concept script and had real potential to be an enjoyable Ghostbusters sequel. This would be the first official confirmation we would get that a third movie was coming. Obviously, this wasn't the case, as I later found out that Columbia Pictures thought that the film being mostly located in a New York version of Hell would be too costly to make, and at that time, I did remember something about the studio not being very interested in making big budget sequels. Then, years later, it was confirmed we were getting an MIB2 that was produced by Columbia Pictures. I thought to myself that maybe they had warmed up to the idea of making a Ghostbusters sequel, but apparently news started coming out that Bill Murray had reservations of making a third film. Later news would pop up that to get the movie made, they would have to kill the character of Peter Venkman due to Bill Murray's unwillingness to be a part of the project. At this point, I decided to take matters into my own hands and track down one of the actual Ghostbusters down myself. So I packed my bags and headed to the United States in 2007 on the mission to meet up with Ernie Hudson and desperately get some information about a third film straight from the horse's mouth. But despite all my efforts, he was very tight-lipped about the whole thing, but he did confirm he was still willing to reprise his role for another film. At least he allowed me to take a sweet photo of us together for my troubles. Was totally worth the trip. Then later that same year, news started coming out about a possible animated Ghostbusters movie after the recent release of a CGI film based on another popular 80s franchise, TMNT. I thought since everyone had aged so much since the last film, that a full CG animated movie with all the original cast would suffice. That news then evolved into the 2009 Ghostbusters video game that actually became a reality. Even though I really wanted a sequel I could watch in the cinemas, I thought the game would suffice for the time. It was again written by the original writers Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, and all the original crew were back doing their original character voices, so yeah, it was great. It's actually considered a direct sequel to Ghostbusters 2, and well, I had a ton of fun playing it. Even though a sequel done through a video game was not really what I wanted, I still thought it was well worth my time. Seeing familiar settings and having a chance to use a proton pack to bust ghosts was an exhilarating experience and one I try to visit as often as I can. The game really captured the tone of the original film, and having to fight Ivo Shandor at the end was a real treat. After the success of the video game, more news about a possible third film arose, with actors like Seth Rogen and Jack Black being named as possibly starring in the movie written by the Office writers Gene Stupnitsky and Lee Eisenberg. The studio had then decided to give Harold Ramis and the two Office writers, who were all scheduled to make another Ghostbusters film, a chance to prove themselves by filming the 2009 movie Year One. I made sure to attend the screening of Year One to show my support to the people who would be tackling the new upcoming Ghostbusters film, but unfortunately the movie was a critical and financial failure, closing the doors again to another possible Ghostbusters film. But finally, after hearing the sad news of the passing of Harold Ramis on the 24th of February 2014, I came to the final realization that I would never see a third film. The cast was now too old, and with one of the most beloved and important persons in the film franchise gone, I had no longer an expectation to see the third film. But soon after the passing of Harold Ramis, we got an announcement of a new Ghostbuster movie. A remake. I remembered at the time it wasn't even confirmed if the movie was going to be a straight reboot, like RoboCop 2014 or Total Recall 2012, or a soft reboot, like Star Trek 2009. What I wanted was a Ghostbuster film that would continue the story from its previous film and see what the characters had been up to after all these years. Unfortunately, in this case, we just got a straight reboot. Even when the first trailer dropped, recognizing the original movie, I held up some hope that it may have been a continuation, but my hopes were again quickly squashed after watching this movie. I don't want to beat a dead horse, as so many other people have already gone through the horrors of this film, but what I'd like to say is that besides the bad comedy and pointless existence, it missed some great opportunities to link the original films to the 2016 film while still letting the new film do its own thing. For example, when the government was aware of the existence of ghosts and would squash the knowledge of spirits, kind of like MIB on extraterrestrials, it gave me the idea that the original team and events from the previous Ghostbuster films could have existed due to government cover-ups on the events from the first and second film. Then when the main antagonist of the film, Rowan, had created machines to bring ghosts out of the spirit world, I thought it was another great opportunity to have the villain find the original Ghostbusters equipment and jerry-rigged that equipment to bring out spirits instead of capturing them. Also, the graffiti spray in the subway of the no ghost sign would have been a symbol from the city's past that most people never knew about, again due to government cover-ups, except for a few who saw the events of Goza in the 80s firsthand. These all would have been good ideas to still tell a new origin story with new characters for all the new moviegoers, being that the original at that time was released 32 years ago, and still linking the original films for the original fans to also enjoy. But that all being said, we may have dodged a bullet on this, as it was probably a good thing that they never linked the films due to this film's unwillingness to make me laugh or care about any of the characters. Fortunately, while all this was happening, a little someone was writing his own script that would pay tribute to the original 1984 Ghostbusters film to please the longtime fans, but also offer a fresh story to new audiences unfamiliar with the franchise. I still remember when the first teaser dropped of the Ecto-1 being revealed at the end with the original score being played. It just blew my mind. After decades of following this film's production, or should I say non-production, this came up without even my knowledge that it was being made, but in true fashion, we would still have delays. No fault of the studio or creative team this time, but rather because of COVID. Originally it was scheduled for July 2020 release, then due to the pandemic was moved to March 2021, then pushed to June 2021, and then again to December 2021 for Australians, and now hopefully, for the last time, January 2022. As of this video, I have not yet watched the movie, as we in Australia won't get a chance to see it till 2022. But however this movie turns out, I'm just going to give a large sigh of relief, as the journey that started back wondering why Ghostbusters was not a trilogy in the early 90s, to finally becoming a full-fledged realization. I want to give a heartfelt thank you to Jason Reitman for finally making this a reality for all Ghostbuster fans across the globe. And if any of the early reviews are something to go by, this might actually all been worth the wait. So just as I started my cinema experience as a wide-eyed 5-year-old kid, being mesmerized by the movie I was watching, I will now be taking my 5-year-old child to start his own cinema experience. I just hope he doesn't have to wait 30 plus years for a sequel to this film like I did. Thank you for listening to me ramble on, and I hope to see you all in the next episode. Take care and good journey.